my position here obviously is we need to get the government up and running. And we have the national discussion going on about the health care, the Affordable Care Act. I voted for the Affordable Care Act, support the Affordable Care Act. We're going to have its glitches as it rolls out, but I had, prior to a few years ago, as we were getting into the run-up of the Affordable Care Act, I had 1,700 families in 1 year go bankrupt because of health care costs. Numerous people losing their insurance. As we're talking about the next generation of manufacturing, it has been an ugly process in communities like ours of people losing their job and not having health insurance. 45, 50, 55, 60 years old, can't yet qualify for Medicare, are stuck, can't get any insurance. That was a problem. Health care costs going up dramatically. But what's happening here is we're now having a discussion from a smaller group in the Republican caucus of Tea Party members who are hell-bent on killing the Affordable Care Act and dismantling it. Now, here's the problem. They have every right as an American citizen and as an elected member of the United States Congress to have that opinion and to fight for that. Here's where I think there is a problem. We have an obligation here in this chamber to make sure that the government runs smoothly, gets funded. We're going to have our arguments as to where the investments are, what the tax code looks like, what are the trade agreements. These are all fights we have in this chamber. I'm not here to say that democracy is pretty. It's ugly. It's messy. There's a House of 435 members, a Senate of 100 members, a president, an executive branch. This is an ugly process. It's inherently ugly. As Churchill said, it's the worst form of government on the planet except for all the others. So we have an obligation to keep the government running. And so my argument, my complaint with what the Tea Party members are doing by saying, well, we'll extend what we call a continuing resolution, funding of the government. We will agree to extend it for 6 more weeks if you defund Obamacare, or if you delay Obamacare. Now, as I said, they have every right to make that argument, and they have every right to have that belief. But a couple of points. We fund the government, and then through the normal process of governing, committee process, the struggle between the House and the Senate, the Republican House and the Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president, we have that fight through the normal budgetary process. You do not shut down the government because you don't like a piece of legislation that passed the House, passed the Senate, was signed into law by the President of the United States, and the Supreme Court deemed it constitutional. You do not shut the government down because of that. You continue the government operating, and then you have this other fight. And guess what? Maybe you won't win the fight. I was here in 2003, 4, 5, 6. The Iraq War was going on. I was against the Iraq War. Had no interest in us going to Iraq. Campaigned against it in my first election. But when we got down here, we, through the political process, fought it. And we tried to end it. And then eventually, in 2006, Democrats won the House, won the Senate. We began the process of trying to continue to end the war in Iraq. We didn't do a very good job of it because President Bush was still in office. But President Bush had just won re-election in 2004. But we continued the fight. And my friends say the Affordable Care Act is not affordable and not popular. Guess what? The Iraq War was not affordable. The Iraq War was not popular. Well over 50% of Americans did not want us to be there at one point. But you just don't shut down the government because a policy has shifted in the country or the mood of the country has shifted on something. You have to work through the political process. So let's have that fight. And if you don't win it, if I was a Tea Party, I'd say, boy, this Obamacare is so bad, set it up and let it go. Wait till the American people see this. We're going to sweep them in 2014. We're going to win the presidency back in 2016. Why wouldn't you just let it go? If it's so bad, let it go. You win the House back. You could defund it. You could strip it down. You win the presidency. Start back over. We could go back to that old system where people are going bankrupt with their current health care plan, or getting kicked off, or not getting coverage for pre-existing. You have every right to do that. So let's get back to regular order. If Speaker Boehner brought a bill to the House floor today, right now, called all members, said we're having what we call a clean CR. We're just going to extend funding from current levels out for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever the number would be, and he brought it to the floor, it would pass. Democrats and Republicans. Senate would send their bill over, President would sign it, government would open back up, and we could go back to having our fights about the Affordable Care Act. And the Tea Party folks could talk about how bad it is, and we'll have examples of people that had benefited, and we'll move on. Now, the other problem I have is that we've already had this political fight. It doesn't stop us from having it again. Sometimes political fights take some time. So we just had this fight. Our friends on the other side call this Obamacare. And President Obama just won re-election. Clean sweep across the country. More Democrats in the Senate. In states like Indiana. Sherrod Brown won re-election in Ohio. President Obama won Ohio and a bunch of other key swing states. When the central issue was repeal Obamacare. So that battle was just fought. And to shut down the government in this process, I think, is improper. And here we have now all these other issues with the debt ceiling coming up and all of these other things. Let's have the fight. Win the political argument. Win the political battle. Take it back to the people in 2014 and 2016, if that's ultimately what you want to do. And as I said, you have every right to do that. This is a democracy. The political system will allow for it. And so I just want my constituents to know, I don't think we should get into a position of necessarily picking what parts of the government should open and not open. I don't think that's a way. Open it up. And the other point is, the Democrats, for the number we want to open it up at, we wanted a much higher number. There's been too many cuts, in our estimation, for some of these essential programs that are long-term investments for our country. So we already compromised because our number was $1.058 trillion or something like that, and the Republican number was $986 billion. And we said, okay, well, the President said we'll take that number. So we already compromised. If you go out and want to buy a car and someone makes an offer for $10,000 and you say, no, I'll give you $9 for it, and they say, okay, we'll take it for $9, that was a compromise. And that's what happened here. But still, to be clear to my constituents, every bill that has come off this floor didn't just say we're going to extend funding for the government. It said we're going to extend funding for the government, and we want to repeal Obamacare, and we want to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and we want to delay it for a year, the Affordable Care Act. That is an issue that has been argued. We can continue to do it, but let's do it through the normal political process. Let's get NIH back up and running, Center for Disease Control, food safety. All of these things can be funded with a total package. If Speaker Boehner brought a bill to the floor, a clean, continuing resolution that funded the government without any of this extraneous stuff, it would pass with Democrats and Republicans. The Senate would agree to it, the President would sign it, and the doors would open back up. So, lastly, let me say, because my friends have come up on the other side and say, well, we want to fund NIH because there's pediatric cancer patients there that need help. And I say, of course we want to do that. But we want every family in America to have insurance if their child gets cancer. We want every citizen to have access. And the Affordable Care Act has done that for millions and millions of people.